Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. So it's been a while since I made a video and we're going to cover several topics in this video. But first I want to start off with the pricing. So we've done some research and we're comfortable enough talking about the price, but I want to emphasize here that this does not mean the release is close. It is not, okay? But we're comfortable enough talking about the pricing. We want to get that out of the way because we get this asked a lot. So for the passenger version, 200 to 300, both engine variants for FS 2020 and 2024 compatibility, we're going to price this at $80 USD. That includes VAT for applicable areas. We also worked out a deal with Just Flight where we can sell this product, the 757, our own plane of course, on our own website. But if you want to get the marketplace version or the Xbox version, which will come several months after release, that's going to be through Just Flight. So you can get all variants through Just Flight if you want, but the PC version you can also get through our website. So there's no hidden meaning behind me talking about a price or announcing it. It's just we get this asked a lot, and at least one question to the community that I can answer. The other one that we get asked a lot is, release date, which I have no information on the release date. We'll talk about the 757 progress in the next segment, and after that we'll talk a little bit about the Expo and then the 767, and at the very end of this video I'll just do some additional commentary and rambling and things like that, some thoughts. But I hope you enjoyed the video, so let's move on to the 757 progress. Okay, so now let's talk about the progress on the 757. I'm going to start off with an outline of our beta testing process. So we have 3 stages of beta testing. And what I should have clarified is that when I said at the Expo it's going to be in an early beta stage, it's going to be at or near stage 1. So we have a total of 60 beta testers, and that includes the BlueBird team. But during stage 1, we're only going to have a handful of beta testers join us in providing feedback, and those beta testers are ones that have deep knowledge of the 757. They're going to provide feedback on those systems. Stage 2 is the big one where the flight management system has to be ready in order for us to enter stage 2 of beta testing. And I'll be totally honest, the flight management system has still several months of work left. We've made good progress on it, but I completely underestimated the amount of work, the calculations, and the time that's required. And to be completely upfront, it's not a limitation of talent or knowledge, it's a limitation of time, because this is not a full-time job for all of us here. So for me and a few others, it's a full-time passion that we do it. For others, it's a part-time. For all of us, it's a passion. We love flight sim and we love working on this plane. So we'll get there with the flight management system. I'll keep you all posted. But when we're talking about, from stage 1 to stage 2, we're looking at easily several months, and then stage 2 to stage 3, I don't know how long that's going to take. Stage 3 is when everybody's going to be the beta testing and providing feedback, and that's going to be when everything is ready for beta testing, all the systems, everything. So we're looking at several months here. I don't want to sugarcoat it or anything like that. I want to be completely upfront. This is why I can't give any sort of release timelines or release dates, because I just don't know how long this whole process is going to take. And for some people, our beta stage 1 is more like an alpha, and beta stage 3 is kind of more of a traditional beta testing. But the reason I want to break this up into 3 different sections is to ease everybody into the beta testing process, to kind of get some of the bugs knocked out in the beginning, first 2 stages, before letting the whole team loose on beta testing. I want to make sure we squash any major bugs, so that hopefully the stage 3 of beta testing will be the smoothest part of the whole beta testing process. That's the hope. Now let's talk about some of the progress and challenges over the last several months as we've been working on this plane. So not unexpectedly, we've encountered various bugs that we implement systems and tests, and some of those bugs took a couple of weeks, some of them took a couple of days to fix. But we have fixed them, and of course there's going to be more bugs that we encounter as we move along. So that's part of the whole process. We brushed up on several animations, hundreds literally of animations of all the switches and knobs and buttons in the virtual cockpit to make sure that the animations virtually behave like the real world counterpart. So that was a lot of cleaning up and kind of tidying up in the virtual cockpit that we did, and various bug fixes, of course, in the mesh and things like that, in the cockpit textures that we worked on and fixed. We are reworking the pneumatic system. So over the last month, we were reworking the pneumatic system to be an accumulation system, and basically that's calculating all the various pressures in the ductwork of the pneumatic system. Now, why we are doing this is because we want to have an accurate engine start procedure. So, like, for example, you have the packs on, there's not going to be enough bleed air to start the engines. We could have implemented simple logic to do that, but we want to have a simulation going on in the background for this process. It also helps out with the pressurization and climate control system, but also for failures later down the line, and enables us to have more realistic failure simulation when it comes to the pneumatic system. We implemented an air-ground system simulation with 48 relays. There's various systems like the thrust reversers and spoilers that interact with the air-ground system, so we want to make sure we have that simulated. activated. We have a functional EEC that basically prevents the engines from over revving if you push the throttles all the way up. The EEC can be turned off. There's 2 buttons on the overhead, but under normal operations, there's no reason to do that. The flight controls, we've been working on the flight controls for several months, and it's almost complete. Another 1 or 2 weeks, we just have to work on the stall protection warning system. The flight controls are basically a custom coding of all the flight, control surfaces, the flaps, spoilers, all the trims, all the other control surfaces. That was quite a bit of work to use our own custom coding for those systems to make sure that they behave like the real world aircraft. We updated the cabin. We've done a lot of updates. The cabin's basically beta ready. In terms of interaction with the cabin, you have like the various lights. There's 3 different lights that you can control, dimmer switches. Then there's the ground services bus that you can control. There's not, other than that, that's basically it. We're not prioritizing cabin interaction right now. Down the road after release, we might add some more features to the cabin. But for now, it's beta ready. We have right now over 250 sound samples in the virtual cockpit. I want to thank Boris and also one of our pilots who stepped up to the plate to help out with implementing those sounds. So it's a very immersive sound environment in the cockpit, and that's important for us. So, great job there. But this is a lot of work, and I haven't even listed some of the other items, like hooking up various circuit breakers. We're going to have at least 200 working circuit breakers by the time this plane is released. Even though 500 are mapped, 200 will be actually functional in the various circuit breaker panels. So there's a lot of other little things that we've done along the way in the last several months. But again, not to sugarcoat it, there's still several months of work left to do here before we can get into that stage 2 of beta testing, and then from there, stage 3. But I hope this gives you guys kind of an idea of the progress that we've made. Now for this next section, I'm going to talk about the Expo. All right, guys, now let's talk a little bit about our plans for the Expo. So this is going to be our first time exhibiting. We're very excited. We're going to have a 10 by 20 booth that's in the corner, one of the corner slots at the convention center. So this setup you see here, minus the PFP4 and the MCP, we're not going to have time to hook that up before the Expo, but everything else will be hooked up. I do want to thank, before I forget, Thrustmaster and Windwing. They sent me a bunch of free equipment. So I have the Thrustmaster yoke, as everybody knows about the Thrustmaster yoke, just an awesome piece of equipment, and the throttles. We also have the Windwing Orion rudder pedals at the bottom here that are going to be hooked up. This is a great setup to fly the 757 on. I have my dev computer on to me on the right. And the reason this computer isn't on is because when I have both computers on, this room turns into a sauna, and I have all the fans off, and it's 90 degrees outside, so I turned this computer off. I don't want to get too hot in here while I'm recording. But this setup here is roughly, when you include the computer, everything, monitor, peripherals, software, you're looking roughly around $4,000, and this is meant to represent something that is, I'll say this in quotes, affordable in the flight sim space. For those of us that have been flight simming for a long time, this is an expensive hobby. There's no way around that. When you add up the costs of all the equipment, computers, peripherals, software, add-ons, it adds up tremendously. But this is meant to be, again, an affordable setup that someone can have at home, and we want to have that setup at the Expo. So looking forward to it. Again, it's a lot of fun. I do most of my testing of the 757 on here. The dev computer really has all my source files, of course, and things like that, so we compile, and I'll do a little bit of immediate testing on there, and then I'll bring it over to this computer and test it out here and do more extensive testing, because it's just so much better to fly with this equipment versus just having a joystick, right? So it's worth every penny. But again, thanks to Windwing and Thrustmaster for sending me this equipment. I can't wait to get this PFP4 unit hooked up. This is just an awesome, tremendous unit, and this is we're going to make sure we have compatibility with this, and we'll work to also have compatibility with the 737 MCP. I mean, it won't be full compatibility. There's some differences, but we're going to work on that as well. And it's really our hope, our goal to by release, if not by release, shortly after, to make sure this equipment, the PFP4 and the MCP are compatible with the 737. So we also are working with another hardware manufacturer. They're not going to be at the Expo, but down the line we'll probably, either they or us or together or something, will announce it. But it's a good time to be in flight sim, with all the different manufacturers you see. creating all this different hardware at affordable prices. It's really awesome to see this. It's nice to see the market taking off. So and my hope is that it only goes up from here. So it's really great. So excited about the expo. I also want to mention we're going to have some giveaways. So some T-shirts. We have a 1/200 scale Gemini Jet 757, the Delta Airlines, that we're going to give away brand new. I have a bunch of these little die-cast planes around the house. I love them. It's just great to have. And my wife doesn't mind them either, which is a good thing. So, but I put them all over the house. And but yeah, as a thank you to the community. I know it's been a long time that we've been developing this, and some people are losing patience and all that stuff. But as a thank you, we want to have some of these giveaways at the expo. So looking forward to seeing you guys there. For those of you that can't make it, in the coming weeks after the expo, I'll make another video just chronicling the whole experience and things like that. So really looking forward to it. We're coming up on, less than 2 weeks now until the expo. So yeah, time flies. I can't believe it's almost been a year since the last expo, but I'm excited to see you guys there. Now let's move on to the next segment and talk a little bit about the 767, and then I'll wrap it up with some additional commentary slash rambling and thoughts for those of you that want to listen to it. So let's move on to the 767. Okay, now let's briefly talk about the 767 model. So we've been in the background working on the model for 2 years. Separate team. It doesn't at all affect the 757 whatsoever, but the main 3D modeler behind the 767, he's tremendously talented. He's done a lot of work, making sure that this model is as accurate as possible. I'm also fortunate that I have unrestricted access to several 767 aircraft, so I've been able to take a lot of pictures, videos, even a couple of 3D scans that O'Neill's been able to take and work on and really create just a truly stellar 3D model, both the exterior model he did and the virtual cockpit model. And then we've also been working on the texturing, which is looking amazing in the virtual cockpit. The texturing you see on the outside is just placeholders while we test out the UV layout on the exterior. So I hope by these screenshots you can get an idea, and the 767, the amount of detail in the 767, but also it's going to set a standard for our future models to make sure that we have just as much detail, if not more. Although, to be honest, I don't even know how much more detail we want to add to any model. What the detail you see here is just phenomenal, in my opinion. Now, we're also going to work on the 767-400 at some point. It will be one of the variants. I will confirm that. I know we've had a couple people ask us about that. Unfortunately, within the last several months, we got some resources on the 767-400, so we're going to use those resources to help model the 767-400, but that's not at this point right now. In terms of the 767, the focus is on the 300ER and getting that out. Now, the 767 is not going to take as long as the 757. Once we get the entire team on the 767, it's going to be developed much faster because we already have the code base. We don't need to do all that whole process of building up the code base and everything all over again. We don't need to do that. So it will definitely speed up development time. But I hope you enjoyed these screenshots of the 767. It's progressing nicely. Now I'm going to just go through the last segment of this video with just some additional commentary. Okay, so if you've made it this far, you want to listen to me ramble and just go on some additional commentary. First of all, as always, I've said this, I appreciate all of the patience and support. This month is actually marks 4 years since we started development of the 757. And to be honest, obviously 4 years ago, I couldn't imagine that we'd still be working on it. But I also have to keep in mind, that the scope of the project was a lot different 4 years ago. If we had kept the whole mid-level scope, we would have already had this released a year and a half ago. And even by some standards now, we can probably release the plane based on some of these releases I've seen. But to be honest, what we're doing now, building the code base, as I've mentioned, this is the hard part. And future projects won't take as long because we'll already have the code base. And when I go back to September 2023, and that's when I onboarded the new team, and they decided to start from scratch with C++ in the programming base. We're entering uncharted territory because the SDK provides a foundation, a basis to just get started on certain things. But once you get into the complex nitty-gritty stuff, the SDK doesn't do anything. and I find it kind of interesting because we've, you know, if you follow any of my Reddit posts or replies, you know, we had someone basically criticizing us, taking, you know, why is it taking so long? You know, they work in the whatever industry and they could get this done much faster and yada yada yada, right? So they, and then one of their responses, which actually did get posted on Reddit because you know, I saw the email that so and so had responded to me, and it was filled with a couple of profanities and sent a link to the SDK, and I'm kind of, it never made it to Reddit for everybody to see it. I wish it did, because then I would have responded accordingly without profanities, of course. But the SDK, it only takes you so far. When you get into building a complex airliner, you're not going to be referencing the SDK for much after a certain point. You know, other than maybe looking up some SimVar or something like that. You know, I have 3 software developers, very talented guys that work on this, and I'll say 3.5 because we have one guy that's kind of in the background working on things, and he's really come up to speed very quickly. So he's helped out with like the XML, brushing up the XML code and things like that. But in terms of the XMLs for the animations and the, you know, different switch behaviors and stuff in the virtual cockpit, but of course the C++ is where the code for all the systems code is at, and you can do, you know, very simple programming also in XML, but the majority, you know, 99.99% of that is in the C++, in the WASM code. So, you know, these guys are very talented, and when we run into an issue, you know, they'll sit down and they'll figure it out, and they'll do testing, and we've had to create our own debug tools that I'm not going to show those tools even at the Expo, obviously. That this is stuff that's proprietary that we want to keep secret to BlueBird. But developing these tools and learning the quirks of WASM, you know, took time. So when we started in September 2023 with nothing to now, you know, a couple 100,000 lines of code, it's been a tremendous task. And I know people think we're slow, and in reality it's been quite fast in the sense of how quickly we're working on this code and developing it and getting it through. But of course there's still work to be done on the code and the systems to implement other systems, and of course the biggest one, as I mentioned in the video, the flight management system. That's a big one. We really, I can't emphasize enough that it's important for us to make sure that we have an accurate flight management system, and it's not an easy thing. So I take responsibility for all of my failures in the sense of announcing any sort of release timeline. I just, at that point, you know, just could not put together my mind. I failed to put together all the different pieces of what's involved. So that's why, again, I can't make a timeline prediction or anything on a release right now, and I still get people asking about releases, and people are worried, well, there's no release in sight that's going to not release till 2030, FS 2050 or whatever, you know. I just kind of laugh at those sarcastic comments and things like that, because those folks unfortunately don't understand the amount of development that goes into creating a quality product. And I have to say quality, right? Because we could, again, release this by certain standards, release the plane now and out to the public, and I'm sure people will have fun with it, but there's still things that are missing that don't give you the experience of the actual plane. So that's what we're trying to mimic here. Our goal is really to be a top-tier company for us. You know, in the beginning, obviously 4 years ago, that wasn't the case. That wasn't my goal. My goal was just with 4 of us to just try to get a product out to market, to get our name out there. But it's fortunate for me and everybody on the team, I think, that we've changed the scope to really go to shoot, you know, as high as we can to be a top-tier developer, and I'm confident that we'll get there. You know, again, the issue is time. It's not the talent. People, you know, we have the talent on the team. It's just finding the time to get everything done, and we will. I appreciate, again, all of the patience. I, more than anybody else, want to get this project done. But, you know, I go to bed every night thinking about it, wake up thinking about it, you know, just coming up with an action plan for the day and things like that. So, but we'll get there. You know, I'm a patient person. My whole philosophy here, and our kind of, our logo, we'll have this displayed at, or I should say our slogan at the Expo is, you know, here for the long haul. You know, we're not going anywhere. It doesn't matter to us if someone tomorrow drops at 757. We could care less, to be honest. It's about showcasing what our team is capable of doing. And just to kind of talk a little bit about my role as the owner of the company. You know, my expertise in flight sim is 3D modeling, but I've found a modeler in MJ. I also call him O'Neill, you know, but MJ, I found a modeler in him that's just tremendously talented, more talented than me, and you know, I guess I'm somewhat talented. Most of the 7.5 model I did, but when you look at the 767 model, like as I mentioned, in the amount of detail, it's phenomenal. So I think to myself, I joke to myself sometimes, like, well, how do I bring value back to my own company here? Well, part of that is I'm fortunate to have several connections all over the world that provide us with data and you know, resources and access to various airplanes. And I'll give you guys a little bit of an insight, and this is by no means an aircraft announcement, because we are not building this aircraft right now. We're not even, we have zero resources devoted to it, but I had a contact, you know, that a while back that gave me the opportunity to go into the world's last DC-8 simulator. So we spent the whole day in the DC-8 simulator, you know, various pictures, videos, even 3D scans. I've had access to a couple of DC-8 aircraft themselves, again, unrestricted access. So when someone gives me this kind of opportunity, I'm not going to say no. Even though we're not working on a DC-8, there's zero resources on the team that's being devoted to a DC-8. So I don't want people to think, oh, they're announcing a DC-8 now. Well, no. So the focus is the 7.5, the 7.6. But I want to kind of highlight my role here is, you know, and is I want to collect as much data on various aircraft as I possibly can, so that if the time comes 5 years from now or whatever, or 10 years, we want to say, okay, we want to do this plane, that we have a repository of information that we can access. Because the last thing you want to do is, you know, after you're, let's say we're done the 7.5 and 7.6, and then the 787, whenever that comes, then we're like, oh, well, what do we work on next? We don't want to have like downtime thinking, well, what are we going to do? So I also had a friend, a contact that said, hey, you know, I know a guy, he's got a $75,000 building scanner, and we can scan this this airliner for you. And I'm like, absolutely, you know, even though we're not working on it, we don't have any plans to work on it, but I'm like, I won't say no to that, you know, it would be stupid, right? So I'm like, yeah, so we have a 3D scan of a, I won't say which plane, but you know, accurate to less than, you know, 5 millimeters basically, a building scanner, a $75,000 scanner. I don't know how this guy did it, but he did it, and he sent me the scan, and I was blown away. I was like, whoa, you know. So this is part of my job here, is to collect data and information. I take trips from time to time to collect this information. The most frequent trips that I've been doing is, of course, with the 767. The 757, you know, we have indirect access to various sources that have access to every nook and cranny of the 7.5. So anytime, you know, there's no need for me to make any trips or anything for the 7.5. So the whole purpose of this ramble is that as a company, you know, I get it, like we are taking, it's been several years and we haven't gotten any product out, but it's really, again, building the base and the foundation that takes the longest. And that's what we're working on. So for anybody that's worried, you know, don't worry, we're going to get there. No other developer, again, I could care less who comes out with if they were to come out with a 7.5 before us, which I don't think there's anybody, you know, I have, again, lots of contacts all over. I don't think anybody else is making a 7.5, but even if they are, we're not going to be like, oh no, you know, it doesn't matter to us, because our goal, our focus with this product is to showcase what we're capable of, so that you get an idea, of course, with all of our future offerings, what we, you know, what we can do. So we always want to strive to do what we can to make a great product. The 7.5 is just the beginning, and I'll kind of share a little bit of insight. Is when I started this model, the 757 3D model 4 years ago, I was going by the SDK, and the SDK gave certain limitations. Okay, you can't go over 1 million polygons for, you know, if you want to make an airliner, you know, try to keep it under 1 million. Well, I used that as a guide, and I kind of basically held back the amount of detail at that time that I wanted to put in the 7.5. It was only until later, maybe a year and a half, 2 years later, right when I realized, we talked to some contacts, that the limit is much higher in MSFS. You can go orders of magnitude higher than 1 million polygons to create an airliner. So we use that to our advantage for the 767, and later parts of the 7.5 that I developed, like the landing gear. The main landing gear actually has more polygons than the entire rest of the model, because that was the point of, I had already realized, okay, so I'm not really capped at 1,000,000, I can go much higher. So what I'm saying here is that the 7.5, well, the model is great, but can I improve it? Absolutely, but we're not going to do that before the release. We're not going to let the model be the holding point for this plane to get released. So at some point later down the line, we may make updates and things like that to the model. Once we release the 7.5, we're not going to forget about it, right? So we're always going to continuously improve as we learn new techniques and things like that. We're going to apply it to the 7.5 because it is going to be our first airplane. It's going to be our baby for the longest time. No matter how many other planes in the future we work on and come out with, the 7.5 will always have a special place for all of us. Because it's going to be our first aircraft that we release. And I think, again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be special. And I say that because people ask, people are sometimes maybe criticizing us and saying, oh, you're trying to be perfect, it's taking too long, and no, we're not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to make sure it's something that's special. We're not trying to model every nut and bolt in the plane, but we want to make sure that the systems are accurate. I find that kind of amusing as well when I see some of the criticism, and that people are thinking that we're trying to be too perfect, or criticizing us for working too long and things like that. And those are going to be the same folks that would criticize us if we release something too early that's unfinished. They'll be the first ones to complain. But I wholeheartedly know that 99% of the community are good people, and I appreciate all the patience and support. And I know that in the last 4 years we've lost some support. There's people that were excited about it that have kind of been disappointed or whatever, and they've actually sometimes even turned a little hostile online. So and hey, it happens, unfortunately. Maybe we'll get those people back, maybe we won't. But I know for the majority of the community, again, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate all the support and the patience. I say this all, I'm going to say this over and over again in these videos, but I appreciate the support, and we'll get there. I want to do my best to keep all of you as updated as I can. I can't reveal everything, obviously. As a business, I have to be mindful of certain things. I try to be as transparent as I can. I try to make these videos as open and transparent, and I wish I had more time to make more videos. I'm not a professional YouTuber. These videos are more for like information, brand recognition, and making people aware of what we're working on is important. At the end of the day, marketing is important. I know some people would think we're just marketing and all hype, but no, we want to market and be upfront about what we're creating, and we're going to deliver on our promise. The words, some people think I'm just blowing hot air here, but when the product is released, the community will see what we're capable of, and I'm excited to showcase that. So, as always, I appreciate it, and I don't know how long I've been rambling here, guys, but I wanted to just share some of these thoughts here and just give you maybe some insight. Maybe it was just a waste of your, time here listening to me, but I hope it is somewhat helpful and reassuring with some of the stuff that I mentioned. And again, the planes that the DC-8, again, it's not an announcement of another plane. It's just I'm kind of giving you guys some insight into my role here in the company, because as I'll probably be taking a step back in terms of 3D modeling. I might still do some 3D modeling, but now I have talented individuals on the team. I can kind of work more on the operations of the business and things like that versus doing the actual development myself. When you have talented people that do that, then I can take a step back and work on it. So I have other stuff planned in the future, gathering data. That's not going to end whatsoever, and that doesn't affect the development of the plane. Anyway, guys, I will see you guys at the Expos. Like I said, it's coming up in less than 2 weeks. I'm excited about that. So until next time, again, I'll say this 100 times because it really means a lot to me, from the bottom of my heart, all the patience that the community has expressed and support, because I know it's taken a long time, but I promise that it'll be worth the wait, and we want to really establish ourselves as a top tier company and make you guys happy. I know there's a lot of 757 fans, and I want to really make sure that we deliver something that's truly remarkable.